Hey everybody, how's it going? Today, it is my pleasure to bring you a detailed, in-depth look at this very rare and unique treat, my 1948 Ford Super Deluxe Tudor sedan. And this is going to be a detailed, in-depth review of the Super Deluxe. We'll start it up, show the engine, get an exhaust clip and go over the performance data, as well as show you a bunch of the unique aspects of the interior as well as exterior. And so, without further ado, let's go ahead and start her up, let her run. The original exterior color is known as Glade Green, featuring the original gray cloth interior, with custom tailored seat covers, which actually was a dealer accessory back then. You see it on that passenger portion back there, and a quick glimpse of the back seat. This portion and the bottom of the bench actually had it too, but they were all ripped up and dry rotted when I got the car, so I just took it off and found how amazingly well preserved the original fabric and the vinyl on the sides was. Definitely something you don't see a whole lot finding these vehicles. Fires up perfect every time. As the car starts to warm up, you just put the choke in slowly. And it'll finally come back down to its normal idle. Perfect. But if you're just starting the vehicle normally after it's warmed up for a little while, there's no need to pull out the manual choke. Neutral. And hit the button to start. Beautiful. These engines have always been known for their reliability and durability. Deluxe was a pretty simple and standard vehicle. Featured manual worm and roller steering on a very large thin rim steering wheel with some grip bolsters across the back and a chrome accented center horn ring. Standard 4-wheel hydraulically assisted drum brakes, and the standard and only gearbox was the Ford Featherlight 3-speed manual transmission located on the column, otherwise known as 3 on the tree. All the way towards you and up is reverse. For those of you who aren't familiar with this pattern, think of it as an H. The middle of the H is in neutral. If you pull it towards you, that's first. Straight up is reverse. Back in neutral. Out all the way up is second. Then down is third. So, neutral, reverse, first, second, third. Simple as that. I'm going to flip on the headlamps. 4-way flashers weren't available on quite a large scale as they are these days. You could also get fog lamps mounted in the front bumpers. They're these little amber lights that you'll sometimes see on vintage cars. Some of these cars also came with turn signals. It would mount to the steering column right here, but this vehicle just has the standard headlights, high beams, as well as parking lights. And as you would expect, all the windows are manual. But something I think is pretty interesting is the Super Deluxe came standard with all laminated glass. Manufacturers just started doing this again pretty recently, but you see the 2 panes here in the lamination? It prevents it from shattering in the case of an impact, and so there's a little bit extra safety and also adds a little bit of noise insulation. So we'll check out the exterior. The Ford Super Deluxe lineup was first introduced in 1941 and ceased production in 1948. a long generation of what is essentially the same car warmed over through the years due to the gap in automotive production during World War II. After Henry Ford introduced the V8 in 1932, the Ford cars produced through 48 had very similar construction, including beam front axles, transverse leaf springs, torque tube drive, and the famed flathead V8. In fact, the six-cylinder option didn't even come out until 1941, in addition to the more powerful V8 in efforts of keeping up with the competition and replacing the wheezy base flathead V8. The all-new Ford for 1941 wasn't a dramatic styling departure, but a modern evolution of contemporary design. Compared to 1940, 41 through 48 featured a 2-inch longer wheelbase, up now to 114 inches, while the length grew over 6 inches to 194.3 inches. One of the advertising paramounts was how much heavy-gauge steel was used in what they called the new lifeguard bodies. Therefore, it gained about 150 pounds in weight over last year's model. A more robust frame that was wider and twice as rigid also helped aid in weight gain, but it also made it more sturdy, especially with a large Xbox crossmember welded at 8 separate attachment points alongside the frame. The original V8 used in the Super Deluxe was the same 221 cubic inch units used since 1932, but warmed over to produce 90 horsepower for 1941. Other notable traits of the early Super Deluxes were their unique 3-piece grille, 2-piece fenders, and elegant styling. The interiors were also slightly different. Headlamps were mounted further apart, and the parking lamps were located on top of the fender, among other minor styling details. The new Super Deluxe also rode better, not only because of its weight and longer wheelbase, but the springs and shocks were softer, paired with a new ride stabilizer bar. It also benefited from better construction, more insulation, and quieter engines for a better ride than ever before. 1942 was an interesting year for the model lineup. Not only did prices increase, but material shortages beginning to be rampant in war effort caused some materials like copper, nickel, and aluminum to be restricted in automotive use. This means styling details like chrome can only be used for the bumpers and grille. Ford got creative though by creating an imitation chrome by using zinc plating over metal trim with a special varnish. Steel was also used more in various interior and exterior parts, including new stainless steel hubcaps. The 42 models built in late December 41 also fell into regulations that were placed in that all exterior brightwork had to be painted, regardless if they just left the assembly line or not. In the engine, cast iron was used for the pistons rather than aluminum, while molybdenum replaced the nickel that was used in the valves, gears, and shafts, which was actually a quality improvement. A clear sign of changing times and priorities. Through cost cutting and material shortages, there were some improvements though, including an all-new front end with prominent hood, 1-piece fenders, and 2-piece rectangular grille. The parking lamps moved again and now parallel to the headlamps, and other styling changes that would be seen through 1948 were the flared doors that now covered the running boards, oval tail lamps replacing the vertical rectangles, among other minor styling details. The interior also departed greatly from the rectangular themed dash to a circular speedometer and clock. The car rode an inch lower, while longer leaf springs improved ride. Twin lateral stabilizer bars and 2-inch wider tires helped improve stability. More underfloor cushioning and better engine mounts also made it even quieter. But it wasn't until February 10, 1942 that automotive production halted in favor of building cars for the war effort. The biggest changes for the Super Deluxe though came in 1946, while essentially carried out until 1948. 46s were essentially carryovers for 1942. Restyled and glitzed up for the eager new car buyer market. Ford actually was the first automaker to roll out a new car off the assembly line in July of 1945, of which a Super Deluxe Tudor went to President Harry Truman. The new Super Deluxes would carry the higher displacement Mercury flathead V8, as well as receive revised rear axle ratios for better performance, although strangely removed in the following couple of years. Exterior changes were minor, but largely included a more robust 3-bar chrome grille. Only 1946s received red grille accents, chrome deck lid strips, and red numbers on the interior gauges. Colors outside and in for 46 through 48s were also greatly improved, aiding in the appeal and customization, especially important since many manufacturers wouldn't release an all-new product until 1949. Fit and finish were also excellent and some of the best you could buy in the price range. As far as 48, it's basically identical to 47 with repositioned parking lamps, new deck lid trim, and interior gauges. At long last, the 1948 Fords were the end of a long and great era of build, quality, and robustness. It wouldn't be until the mid-50s and early 60s before cars had the detail and quality that the last of the pre-war Fords carried. Now this Super Deluxe actually has a lot of factory and aftermarket options that you can get back in the day. including a robust brush guard located right in the middle of the front bumper and the bumper flanges that you see on either side of the front bumper, as well as the rear bumper. Not to mention a backup light, electronic gas cap release, as well as fuel door protection to protect your paint finish, bumper guards front and rear, inside heater, as well as an AM radio. The list just seems endless, and this one MSRP'd originally for probably around $1,300. It even has a windshield washer tank, which I'll show in just a second. Now this Super Deluxe features 15-inch steel wheels with polished stainless steel wheel covers and the Ford logo in the middle, wrapped in bias-ply tires, pretty much a standard setup for the day. The steel wheels are actually painted to match the vehicle and can be had in a variety of colors. Also with 12-inch hydraulically assisted drum brakes at all four corners. Now the Super Deluxe featured a beam front axle with transverse semi-elliptic leaf springs front and rear. While many manufacturers were starting to go to front independent suspension with coil springs as well as longitudinal leaf springs in the rear, this primitive setup does nothing for handling profile, I'll definitely tell you that. It's actually a lot more prone to body roll, so in the later years, especially with the newer Fords, they definitely got a much better increase in handling and stability over some of these earlier models. Overall length is 198 inches, while width is 73 inches and height is 66 inches. Total curb weight, depending on how equipped, is around 3,216 pounds.
And we're going to pop the hood.
The Super Deluxe 8 featured the optional 239 cubic inch flathead V8, while the standard option was a 223 cubic inch 6-cylinder. The V8 produces 100 horsepower at 3,800 RPM and 190 pound-feet of torque at 2,000 RPM, while the 6-cylinder put out 90 horsepower and 180 pound-feet of torque. When the latest Super Deluxe debuted for 1946, it also came with some engine enhancements. The flathead now featured aluminum pistons with 4 piston rings, replacing the 3-ring iron pistons of earlier models. Lubrication was also improved thanks to a larger oil pump, while the ignition was now sealed up to prevent water from leaking in. 0 to 60 times were a lofty 21.5 seconds, while quarter-mile times were reported to be 23 seconds at 63 miles an hour. My, how times have changed. Top speed was around 84 miles an hour. As far as fuel economy, with a 17-gallon tank on leaded fuel back in the day, mileage ratings were around 16 city and 20 on the highway. This Super Deluxe also has the optional windshield washer tank via that mason jar in the engine like you saw on the Firewall, but more on that a little bit later in the video. Now those of you who haven't seen too many cars at this day and age, it might be quite a culture shock to see the differences between something of this era and something of, well, 2014. Cars back then, they weren't built to be fast, they weren't built to be necessarily sleek and sporty, but they were big, they were stylish, they had a certain amount of command and presence to them. The interior of the Super Deluxe is the most glitzed up model. It has all the extra padding across the doors, carpet, as well as vinyl, chrome accents everywhere you look, side vents, as well as contrasting gray metal surrounding all the glass. You also have padded armrests. Like I said, both 2-door and 4-door models of the Super Deluxe had a full bench seat up front, but they were styled differently. The 4-doors had a one-piece back, while this one can split and fold so you can get into the back seat obviously. They are manually sliding, and this is the original seat fabric. It had one of the original optional seat covers on it. You could see the plaid on the front passenger side as well as the back, but they were torn up and stuff, so I took it off when I bought the car. The back is also original, the carpet is all original, and the front features rubber floor mats. It's very easy to get into the back, and plenty of room. It's almost like a big couch, and I'll show that a little bit later in the video. Large step-up bars, the rubber floor mats up front for easy cleaning, your large handbrake as well as your dimmer switch on the bottom left-hand side of the floor, contrasting gray dash matching the window surrounds as well as the steering column. The cream-colored plastic on the dash is original and matched the color on the steering wheel before it faded off over the years. All the gauges are original amongst their polished metal housing. Even the headliner is all original.
So let's get and see how she sounds.
It's amazing how smooth these flatheads are, especially for being as old of an engine as it is. It's just run like a champ.
Now we're going to shut her up.
Now from the factory, the Super Deluxe did not come standard with a radio. It came with a radio delete plate. It would basically just cover up a hole where a radio would go if you went and ordered one from the factory. This particular Super Deluxe, along with the other styling aspects that it has, like I mentioned earlier, did come with the optional AM radio and actually works fantastic. It's the Ford Adjust-O-Matic AM radio with 5 presets as well as manual tuning. You can adjust the tone off to the left and your band is off to the right. It's a tube radio, so when you turn it on, it has to warm up for a couple seconds. There's a single 6x9 speaker up under this speaker grill here, and once it warms up, it plays fantastic. Quite a big antenna. You have to pull it up manually to get the best reception. Now, like I said, the headliner and visors in this car are original, with optional vanity mirror where you can write in service records and travel records on either side. It also came standard with a non-dimming rearview mirror. On either side of the speaker grill are a set of ashtrays. You just flip open the little doors and you grab them to pull them out. Very simple. Now another really neat feature of this radio are the preset stations. And while optional, this car doesn't have it, you can also opt for a foot pedal that would mount in the floorboard and plug into the back of the radio, which would automatically be able to cycle through the different presets when you tap it with your foot. This one though uses the transparent bar in the middle to cycle through your 5 different preset stations as well as manual mode. The manual allows you to more freely go across the music band, while in these modes it's more fine-tuning and precise so you can get the exact station that you want. Another neat thing too, back then they didn't have electronic wipers, or at least they weren't in mass production. These wiper blades are actually vacuum assisted. There's a vacuum pump that builds up pressure while the car is running and uses it to power the wiper blades. You go to the left hand side of the dash here, your lighting controls like you saw earlier, and this is your throttle, or manual throttle control, so if you need to warm the vehicle up, you just pull that up and it'll idle faster. Down below that is your electronic actuator for the fuel cap like I touched on earlier, your interior lighting brightness, as well as the button, chrome accented, for the vacuum assisted wiper bottle. So when you press it and hold it, it builds up the pressure, and then release it, and your wiper fluid shoots up onto the windshield. Now, the little washer jets are adjustable for the angle and they need to be a little bit more adjusted in this particular one, but it's definitely a pretty cool feature. If you hold it down just a little bit, it'll build up a little bit less pressure so it won't shoot out quite as much. Otherwise, if it builds up a lot of pressure, you're going to shoot a lot of water everywhere. Then just flip open the wiper blades and you're ready to go. Down below your speedometer cluster, you have your manual choke like I showed you earlier, as well as your lighter, and heater controls that also illuminates. Down below is your heater box, a pretty rare option for this day. You just open up the little doors for your feet, as well as the bottom one for floorboard. Up top, there's actually some pipes that route out to some defrost holes mounted up in the windshield cowl. And since there were no air conditioning systems back in this day, there was an actual fresh air vent. You would just push on that lever down below and flip it up. There's a little grill to prevent bugs and stuff from entering it, but it definitely makes it a whole lot more comfortable driving at higher speeds down the road. I'm going to shut her down. And we'll check out the back seat. In order to gain access to the back seat, all you have to do is flip the seat forward. It tilts up and away, so you can easily slide in. And upon entering the vehicle, the rear seat passengers are treated to a limo-like room and comfort. The large couch-like bench seat, 2 armrests, carpeting in the back, as well as standard footrests. And on the passenger side, there's actually a little cloth grip handle to aid entry and exit. You barely have to duck. You just walk on in the car. It's pretty awesome. Very comfortable. Got your little armrest. These windows actually roll down in 2 different ways. They roll down like a regular window, also with laminated glass as the front, but they also roll back to create a little vent. And the only tear in the headliner is that little bit right above the rear window. There's also pillar lights right above the B pillars. They actually do work. They could probably use some new connectors or a little bit of cleaning, but I have had them on a couple times. Not to mention little ashtrays. And we're going to check out the rest of the vehicle, shall we? The rear trunks of these Super Deluxes are extremely sturdy and solid, made of heavy gauge steel, and often being described as being like a turtle shell. There is some insulation on the back side of it, but overall there's a ton of interior trunk space. There's spare tires located in the back, and there's trunk liners located across the sides and the back to kind of give it a little bit more of a finished look. This is actually one of the original spare tires. Not sure how old it is, but it's definitely one of the older bias ply tires. Your stock trunk mat, and you can see in this particular one there's no rust in the trunk floorboard or anything like that. Definitely pretty cool. Lockable glove box. Also has the original owner's manual. The glove box is also pretty good size. Cardboard lined. Actually has a lot of documents and advertisements in it. The original boxes for the wiper blades, and some instructions for the washer bottle itself.
With a nearly 10-year model run of this generation Deluxe and Super Deluxe, they sure served their purpose, not only for consumers but through the war effort. A great example of a strong model lineup for the day and its signature 1940s styling before the all-new Fords debuted for 1949.
Well everyone, I hope you enjoyed the detailed look and test drive of the 1948 Ford Super Deluxe. Be sure to stay tuned next time, there's a lot more where that came from. Take care everybody.